All right, we are going to dive straight in. Marketers nowadays, especially with everyone talking about being data-driven, are constantly measuring things and constantly talking about what you should and what you shouldn't. I want to know from a personal perspective, and tell us about your anecdotes and your roles, of course, about which KPIs you have found have consistently delivered actionable insights for your team or helped you to measure them. Maria, shall we start with you?
Okay, should work now, right? Yes. Let's take the context. I always worked in the last 15 years, always worked in the traditional banks with the digital transformation in mind. And obviously when you think about mobile experience, you all have probably more than one mobile banking installed now on your phones. We are always talking about conversation with our existing customers. Very rarely will be promoting our app to acquire new customers. Typically that account opening happens elsewhere and then the customer continues using our app. And this is where the measurement becomes really, really important, because if you think about that, we have a ceiling on the number of impressions we have. This is basically our customers and how often they log into our app. So what means to us, increase the engagement, meaning if the customer wants to bank with us, the app should be preferred source of transaction or checking the balance or anything else. Secondly, we need to make sure that we anticipate what the customer might need, and the predictability of the offers becomes really, really important. Thirdly, proactively engage the conversation, especially in the wealth space. How do we make sure that the customer comes back to us being nudged by us because we provide information, insights, helpful information to manage finance? From that perspective, measurement is really about how frequently we manage to bring customer in the app and how well we interact with the customer within the app. So your CTRs, which are typically, I'm coming from the paid media background, and CTRs is important, but even more important within this environment, inside our app, is our offer relevant? Is the presentment clear? Are we changing the offer frequently enough for the customer to stay engaged? Do we know what the customer might need in this very point? So these are becoming the cornerstone of measurement eventually, but this is a translation of the strategy because we want to have a meaningful interaction with each and every customer in the app. So next time you log in to any of your banking apps, do you have relevant offers? Do you want to come back? Are you interested to come back to your banking app to learn how to manage your finance better? I think this is the key questions, and the measurements reflect that.
Jason, same question. So tell us about your role and which KPIs really help you know whether you're going in the right direction.
Right. So I cover across performance marketing and lifecycle marketing. So we look at the end-to-end journey of a user. And I really like what Maria talked about in terms of like looking at what brings the value for the users, the reason for them to come back. Similarly, when we look at KPIs, I think it's a matter of what we evaluate or interpret KPIs. Maybe a show of hand, how many of you enjoy tracking KPIs? Not many. Oh, I see. Frank from Internet, I love doing it. So he clearly sees value out of using it, but I think the truth is that many of us find KPI in some sense a bit cumbersome, or sometimes we don't like to look at it because we see it as a ruler to measure our success in terms of whether we are doing well or not, and more often or not, the targets are too stretched, and KPIs indicates that we are always like failing or not reaching our targets. Right, so we don't like to approach the idea of KPIs, but if you switch your view to think about how KPIs can be something that drives insight for you, it changed from a ruler to actually a tool that supports you. So what do I mean by that? In many companies that we've seen or I've spoken to or been before, many of us set KPIs in terms of a singular absolute value, meaning to say that we looked at year on year, what's your number of new user growth, right? Year on year, your total traffic growth, total install increase. But these are singular metrics. If you look at singular metrics, it doesn't tell you the full story. So what do I mean by that? If let's say you grow your new users 2x from this year to next year, but your spends went up by 4x, would you say that you have succeeded in your KPI? I don't think your boss will be very happy, right? So think of it as, when you look at KPIs, find those that gives you multi-dimension angles. So at Endowus, we looked at some of the key metrics like CAC, cost of acquiring a user, right? So this tells you both stories. Total cost we spend as well as how many users we're acquiring. One can grow without the other, right? So if your CAC is going up, it tells you to look into two stories. One is that overall CAC is going up. Is it because my spends are going up but my acquisitions are not, right? If your spends are going up, that's where you use it as a guidance to then navigate. Is it because we introduce a new channel and these channels are not acquiring as much for us? If it's the other way around, let's say you maintain your CAC throughout the year, is it because my acquisitions are holding still? I'm not growing at a faster rate. Is it not scalable? So you look at matrix that gives you two angles. Maybe another example that might be more relevant, it's in my previous roles at Lazada, we look at, I think one straightforward thing you think about campaign success would be how many orders are there, how much revenue we earn. But that again is a singular metric, right? If you look at a multi-dimension metric, it will be like average order basket size, AOV, average order value, right? So interestingly, in one of our campaigns, we saw that the total number of orders spiked, but total revenue didn't grow as much. Why is that so? Because we realized that people are trying to game our voucher systems. If your average orders are about $50, but you have 3 vouchers that each of them say means spend $10, what will a common sense user do? Split it into 3 different orders. Right. So then suddenly my orders tripled. Fantastic performance, but my total revenue remains pretty much the same. That's not really a success. So when I say look at KPIs that are insightful, look for those that show you multi-dimensional ones so they can form a picture for it.
I think that show of hands was really telling. So I think the fatigue also comes from the fact that there are so many metrics available, right? So how do you determine which ones truly matter for your growth and retention? Maria, can we start with you?
I think one of the rule of thumb I always discuss with my team is less about the dashboard and KPIs and measurement, but what are we doing with that metrics being available to us? And things evolve, right? So what we measure really has to be connected with what we're supposed to do. If I'm measuring CTR, let's say in my mobile app offers, do I have enough pipeline to change those offers frequently? Do I have enough placements in my app to present those offers? Do I have any intelligent system behind those offers to rotate them, right? Shouldn't be the manual process. So I think that leads also to the overall strategy where we see those around MarTech enable teams with the MarTech capabilities. Very often we start with some basic foundational capability being the measurement, but as we evolve our stack with decisioning, targeting, segmentation capabilities coming on board, our measurement evolve because much more we can do with information we know about the customer's interaction, right? So again, speaking with different markets, we might be in the different stages of our MarTech stack evolution. For some, just total number of users in the app and how frequently they log in is good enough because maybe they don't have sufficient stack to act more advanced on that. But as the stack evolves, so our measurement should evolve, right? So if we're able to do more things with our capabilities, we should measure a little bit more in more advanced way to be able to act on that.
I think that's really interesting to look at it from an organization's maturity perspective also. Would you like to add to that, Jason?
Yeah, I think I fully agree with that. The key point you mentioned here is the different stages that you're at, which also helps to then guide your North Star. So earlier, I think when Teresa was sharing one of the slides where all the KPIs were listed across like 4 different stages, suddenly everyone takes out your phone and start taking photo. Somehow we love to look at a lot of metrics and a lot of like stages, but if you really want to narrow down on what's impactful for your business, it's really take a step back, assess which stage are you really at now. Because like Teresa said, for example, TikTok, maybe to optimize within TikTok, it's getting to the 300K installs first. If your business is not even there yet, and you are trying to, like, let's say, gun straight down the funnel to say that quality of users coming in, the system is bound to fail because you haven't given the system enough data to learn. So maybe your first step is getting to that 300K mark. Isolate your North Star, and then from there you branch that out. So similarly, and also like I mentioned earlier, I cover across performance and lifecycle marketing. So there is a whole spectrum of metrics that we looked at from CPI all the way down to CR, all the way down to your first investment rate, multiple investments, right? How then do we focus the attention? So we split into these 2 pillars. For performance marketing, we looked at CAC, how much I spend to acquire user. That's the singular North Star. Everything else are kind of like leading or lagging indicators that contribute to this singular North Star. And then for life cycle, we looked at lifetime value, right, which is a component of how much you're investing with us, as well as how long you're retaining with us. So then everything else are like sub-metrics that contributes to this. But if you can identify that singular North Star, I think that guides the decision a lot better, and you don't spend too much time being distracted by smaller components of different metrics.
That's an interesting question. So basically metrics that help you understand stickiness or lifetime value. Maria, what would be your go-to? What would you look for when you're trying to decide who are my most valuable customers, who are the loyal ones, who are spending most amount of time.
I think I'll stick to the also previous thoughts. What is our strategy? What can we offer to our customers to do to be a better firm for them, right? So number one, we always look, have we done enough job to offer the customers the offerings which they would appreciate, right? So certainly the cohort view, right, when we see certain customers, perhaps would benefit from upgrading or taking up next level of services. This is our idea of understanding where they're staying and what offer we can give them. If we see some signs of churn, what are we doing? What could we do better in terms of providing the core services within the app? Are they facing any challenges? What can we do to provide them ideas? What else they can be doing, right? So I think this is important. Also, not to treat everyone the same way, but understanding the strategy, and the strategy will determine the measurement, which we can provide, and we start measuring. Very often I'm in charge of digital analytics implementation. We look through our journeys, and the first view probably, okay, let's just understand the funnel. But as we understand the funnel and as things becomes more stable, we want to understand within the funnel where the customer drops off, what is the last field interacted. That gives us the idea, what can we do better with our journey? How can we improve the experience to make it seamless for our customers? Can we understand better where the customer drops off and what questions? Maybe everything is okay with the journey, but sometimes I can see the field which puzzling the customer how much I can invest with you, right? Which means that we need to help customer to kind of like navigate in terms of the benchmarking, how much is good to use this product for, right? So I think it goes very often, it goes beyond just UX, UI, but more understanding where we can support and help customers better to use our products.
So I like that Maria's kind of talked about why people stay and then why people leave. So I just wanted, Jason, also you to chime in about what do you look for about early signs of churn or disengagement, and what do you use that data to then act on?
Yeah. So I think as a marketer, your first principle is always client first. Understand the client's why. The term churn and disengagement might always seem like it's a negative thing, but you need to understand what the client is using your platform for, right? So for platforms like maybe a banking solution or a wealth platform where we help people invest towards their goals, sometimes churn is a good thing. Why? It sounds weird, right? It's because the client has achieved their goal. Let's say they set up a goal to save up for their next house. They've achieved that goal, they need to deploy that cash to buy the house. So they have to churn, right? So don't just see it immediately as negative. Understand what the client is doing for. So for us, we looked at such points where if a client does a significant withdrawal, right, we go back to look at what have they set their goals on our platform for, what are the purposes, we reach out to them, understand, is it because you are not satisfied with the growth rate, or have you hit your targets and hence you are, for the moment, withdrawing your funds, achieve your goal, and then maybe in future where you have spare access, you will actually return, right? So it goes back to understanding what the user use your platform for. And also when we talk about disengagement, in quick cycle businesses like, for example, an e-commerce or TikTok again, and as an experience, you want clients to come in regularly, right? You measure them by DAU, how much time they spend on your app, because that's your business model. Whereas for an investment or a wealth building platform, we look at long-term growth, right? In fact, sometimes we encourage clients to not come in so often, especially when markets are volatile, you get emotional easily, and then you want to react. But if you have your goals set in plan, you shouldn't react, you should just leave it. So quite contradictory, it might be the case where actually we don't want you to engage as much. We want you to set the plan, trust the plan, follow the plan, right? So it really depends on which business model you are in, and then does it make sense that you want high engagement or not?
I think that's a really interesting way to approach it, and it does make a lot of sense. I mean, even if you look at a dating app, it would be success that you found your love of your life, for example.
Better not be on the app again.
Okay, so I want to go back to something that you said at the beginning of the conversation, which is not to look at metrics in isolation, but to look at them sort of together. So I want to ask about balancing, say, short-term and long-term. So if short-term could be performance indicators and long-term could be brand health metrics. So how would you encourage your teams to kind of look at data or metrics that would help them understand whether they're doing well in the short term, but on the right path for the long term? Maria, shall we go with you first?
I'll give one example when I was thinking about this question. Give one example from my previous roles, right? So, and again, that sticks to the advancement of the teams. We started doing marketing mix modeling in the objective exactly to link our brand preference objective in our performance goals. And we did have seen a lot of correlation. Our ability to sell in certain markets was very connected with brand preference metrics, right? And I start looking, okay, what affects our brand preference metrics? Then can MMM show us that? But that kind of analysis, but also ability to act on that analysis requires a lot of maturity in terms of skill set advancement in your marketing or digital analytics team. Requires a lot of infrastructure from MarTech perspective. Does it make sense to do this kind of like mature analysis across like many markets, for example, if the company operates across many markets? Probably not. It's becoming not only expensive to develop it, but also quite expensive to act on it. And this is the most important part, not only to see the dashboard, but be able to act on it. This is the critical cornerstone part. So I think this kind of analysis, when the maturity is there, and I think a lot of the actions which pertains to low-hanging fruits already done, MMM becomes a great opportunity to understand how do you link your immediate spend for performance marketing with your brand goals and your brand results, and how you try to grow them in the long term, because this will take time. This makes sense to do when you have the infrastructure, a maturity of your people and skill sets, partners and within organization. Then you do it and you see the result, but very, very difficult. So I've seen it. Doing the analysis at dashboard, not a problem at all. So we did it like in a couple of like months minimum, right? But acting on that and explaining people what is MMM and how to act on that, what's the channel saturation, it takes so much time, really, but really worth it.
I think it's also a continuous work in progress for your team also, right? You're understanding metrics, your team is evolving with it. Jason, so same question to you. What advice would you give to teams who want to balance short and long-term goals via indicators?
Yeah, I think this is an age-old question for all marketers. We probably hear it in one form or another, right? Almost every marketing event, we always ask about how do you balance between performance marketing or brand marketing, right? We think of them as though they are separate binaries. I think that's how humans' mind are naturally wired. We try to look for ways that we can do things that are binary, yes or no, 1 or 0, right? Truth is, if you can find a winning formula, it's more often in the middle ground where your performance marketing can be your brand marketing, right? It should work towards your brand marketing. So what I mean, if I use an example that we see in Endowus, it's that if I run a promotional ad, let's say I give you $100 when you sign up with us, versus I run a brand building ad about like maybe advocacy, clients are trusted with us, something around that angle. Naturally, you will think that the $100 ad is going to perform well, right? In your short-term goals, chances are it looks like very attractive, your click-through rates, your sign-ups are very high, right? But if you take a step back and look at the bigger picture in terms of long-term brand building, you connect the data sets. I think this also ties back to the level of MarTech maturity that you have. If you are fortunate enough to have the capability to track all the way down to, let's say, funded behavior, how much do they invest? Life cycle, do they stick with you? Are they like gamers who are in and out quite fast? You try to look at those stats, you will realize that actually the brand ads are the one that bring future value for you. There are something that invest for the long term. So when looking at between short and long, try to find something that your short contributes eventually to the long. The way I think about it, or the way I try to convince management also, I mean, being pragmatic, right? We need to deliver KPIs again, every year annual targets. So I think of it as do enough short-term wins to survive, but build enough long-term to thrive, right? Your survive means how do you then deal with your management, how do you deal with stakeholders, are they satisfactory with your performance enough? The bigger challenge in a business, it's often how do you get the rest of your team to also think long-term? Because I think in today's environment, the truth is the younger folks, or maybe even the more senior folks, are shifting from one job to another within 2 to 3 years. Yeah. They may not think long-term for a business. They just want to score really well short-term, earn that performance bonus, move on to the next job, right? You need to think about, if I want to build a team that thinks long-term with the business, how do they get rewarded for thinking long-term with you? So you need to incorporate that into part of your KPI scoring for your team as well, so that they don't just think short-term. Because if each individual, we are born selfish. You think about your own benefit, you will want to score the highest bonus next year. 2 to 3 years, that's it, move on, right? So whether the business does well in the long term doesn't really affect me, right? But at Endowus, we try to incorporate that where every employee has a piece of share of the company also. So in that sense, there is value for us to want to contribute for long-term wins. So we think on longer terms, and that helps us grow it as a whole.
So this leads perfectly as a segue to my next question, which is you spoke about North Star metric, and there's one for the business, and then there's a trickle down for each team and what they would be working on. So is there like a strategy, or is there any advice that you would give people to make sure that this is all aligned, right? So each team individually is working towards one common universal good, and then you break it down into what that means on like a short-term basis. But like you said, moving towards one long-term goal that all teams or individuals have. So any advice for our audience?
What I always ask my teams as well is, okay, can we build this dashboard? Can we have these KPIs? No problem. But there is always should be a question, so what? What are we going, not only, okay, we are going to report on this metric, fantastic, but what we're going to do for our customers based on this metric? Can we do anything? Is it meaningful for our customers and for business? I think that kills a lot of the dashboards, which is good, but which distills very, very important metrics. When we think from that perspective, we start thinking, okay, if I measure this will potentially mean this and these actions for my customer services, for my business. And this creates a long-term plan. We start sticking to that specific metrics. Sometimes these metrics, in my previous roles, we were creating a group of customers we wanted to specifically measure, because this was the strategy at that point of time. It was the COVID years. And that measurement would not be meaningful for business now, because in that point of time, it was important for us, important for our customers, hence we measured that. Time changed, strategy changed, we forgot that metric, we came to something else. But very, very important, every time I say, okay, if we measure this, so what that means in actions, can we actually apply? Tomorrow we look at that metric, can we actually do anything with that metric for our customers and for business? I think this is one important questions which we must ask from the teams and from stakeholders to stay relevant.
Jason, final thoughts?
Yeah, I think so what is the golden question, right? So probably if all of us go back and just do a clean up, you realize a lot of your dashboards are just collecting dust, right? We love building, we ask, build it, look at it, use it for like 1-2 weeks, get excited, present it once. 3 months down the road, is the dashboard actually useful? Are those data insights actually actionable? Chances are maybe 1 or 2 metrics out of the entire dashboard, right? So always go back to the question of so what kind of value are you bringing to the customer? Be very customer focused, right? At the end of the day, if you have so many metrics across different teams, and unfortunately sometimes teams do have conflicting KPIs, you need a singular source of truth to kind of like justify why one takes priority over, and that singular source should always tie back to so what it means for your customer. Does it bring value for your customer? If it doesn't and it's more for the business, it gets tricky, right? Always go back to the customer, and that will reward you in the long term, because if you do right by the customer, customers will do right by you. Which brings back to, I think the first panel, we talked a lot about community building. You do right by the customer, eventually a community will form, your referral will become the strongest channel you ever have, and you don't even have to pay that much for that. The goal for all marketers, I feel, should be to aim to get, it sounds a bit weird, spend less so that your organic channels can take over your paid channels. If you're always scaling but reliant on your paid channels alone, your business is not scalable, because you are then dependent on investor dollars. I mean, somebody has to pay for it. But if you can create communities that are strong enough, because you have dealt with all the so whats, so that your customers see value with you, your organic channels will take you forward. And that's where you reach a stage of scalability.
That's interesting.